Hey everyone, welcome to #Malkin Live. I have got a great guest, a repeat guest, one of my favorites, investigative journalist and the conservative Michael Moore, you might call him, the documentarian and author of The Invaluable, and I think deserving of a Pulitzer Prize and every other prize on the planet, the Trayvon hoax. It's Joel Gilbert. I'm going to bring him right in. Hey Joel, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Oh my gosh, there's so much happening, so much relevant to all of the information that you put on the table, not only about the Trayvon hoax, but of course, the Benjamin Crump, who is, we just cannot get rid of this guy. I mean, he's the bane of America's existence. A couple of weeks ago, filed a lawsuit against the Twin Cities, as well as the 4 officers who were involved in the George Floyd incident. And then we have the George Floyd body cam tapes that were leaked to the Daily Mail. So that's all in the news again. Your thoughts on either of these two recent events, first of all?
Sure. Well, we'll get into it in a minute. The fact that whenever there's mayhem and riots, typically Benjamin Crump is in town with Al Sharpton, his hero, whether it's in Sanford, Florida, Ferguson, Missouri, or in this case, a predictable outcome up in Minneapolis. And as is typical, the media create a narrative often based on Ben Crump's concepts of Skittles and iced tea, or they took the hands up, don't shoot. In this case, they borrowed I Can't Breathe from the Eric Gardner incident. And the media runs with the narrative. They get the public to react. The media runs with it. And they pretty much don't care about or simply hide relevant facts, like, as you alluded to, came out on the body cam, that George Floyd was saying he was having trouble breathing before he was even on the ground. Of course, the toxicology came out much later. He had 4 times the amount of fentanyl in his system to kill somebody. So he may have been having a very serious medical episode long before he was on the ground. And these policemen can't necessarily be, medical technicians. Just about every suspect, if you watch Cops on TV, the reruns now, because it's been canceled, you got to watch the reruns. They all want to go to the hospital and not jail. So they all say, I can't breathe, I got a headache, whatever it is. So they ran with this narrative. And what happens is this stuff comes out in trial a year later, and we find out everything we were told at the beginning was not true. And all these reactions and all this mayhem and all this division, totally unnecessary, as I demonstrated in the Trayvon hoax, that George Zimmerman was framed with a fake false witness, Rachel Gentile. The alleged girlfriend was not the real girlfriend. And I found the real girlfriend and showed that the entire case was built on a lie. And the Floyd case, we're going to find out, though it kind of looked bad in the video, I think there's a lot more going on, which, as you mentioned, came out from the body cams.
Right. And we're just getting a partial snippet of the total amount of video footage that is available to anyone who actually trekked out to the Hennepin County courthouse. The access to these body cam videos was supposedly greatly limited and restricted by the judge in that case. Of course, now they're all rooting around to see how the leak actually happened. But I think we were able to see, because of the Daily Mail's leak, maybe 28 minutes between 2 of the cops' body cams out of the more than 1 hour, I think, that you can actually go and see if you had signed up under these judges' orders and restrictions. So as usual with all of these manufactured narratives that are catalyzed by some snippet of video, we're talking about a very warped view of actually what happened, and it's manufactured narrative and hoax piled upon hoax. I haven't actually sat down yet to read the full complaint that Crump filed on behalf of the Floyd family, but again, it follows the same kind of template that has turned him into a multimillionaire. He's claiming that the city had allowed a culture of, quote, excessive force, racism, and impunity to flourish in its police force. And here, of course, all of the investigative work that you've done in the Trayvon Martin hoax, the Trayvon hoax was so key because you got to actually see the nitty-gritty details of how he inserted falsehoods into this frame of police officers willy-nilly targeting Black people in outright brazen acts of homicide.
Correct. It's pretty much a formula. Crump comes in and says the incident was racism, even though there's no basis for it whatsoever. Then he says the police cannot be trusted to investigate. We've got to go to the FBI or whatever the police, whatever the coroner came up with a very specific autopsy report. He died of a heart attack based on fentanyl overdose, toxicology, COVID. He was not asphyxiated. They don't care. He says, well, the official investigation was biased. So he brings in some coroner to look at the videotape to come up with a completely different conclusion. It's the same formula. And then Crump says, okay, give us a lot of money. And by the way, I've got some political demands from my allies in Al Sharpton's gang, and we want you to change the entire political system and surrender American values and American principles and parts of the Constitution to accommodate me. And that's the formula. It plays out every single time, and it's usually based on a hoax and false information or a lack of information. And Crump has built a little bit of a career on this. And that's why recently I decided to do a deep dive back into his history, because he came out with this, you might have seen this book. There he is with Al Sharpton, by the way. It's always Al Sharpton with Crump. But his book came out last fall. People heard of this, called Open Season, Legalized Genocide of Colored People. Now, who uses the term colored people? Maybe he should be canceled for using that term. But interestingly, it's HarperCollins, owned by the Murdochs, that published it. And it's just a race-baiting nonsense. And that's why
By the way, he launched the book on a huge mainstream platform. I remember watching the interview on CBS this morning with Gayle King, treated him with, velvet gloves. I mean, he got the star treatment for the launch of the book, which I think made the New York Times extended list. Correct.
So he's been promoting this around the country, and lo and behold, there's an incident with police where a Black person dies. And again, if you just look at cops, all they do is chase guys that are out on probation, that are on meth. And they pretty much have to arrest these guys. And a small percentage of them are going to decide to resist or fight the cops, and the cops do different things to subdue them. Occasionally, there's a terrible accident, as this case might have been, or someone gets killed. Sometimes it's a policeman that gets killed. So the left takes these incidences and blows them up as systemic and racial, even though they're very, very rare outliers. Often the cops are Black themselves, or in this case, we had a multiracial group of cops that all got charged with murder. And when this goes to trial in a year or whenever it is, I think they're probably going to be acquitted, and there'll be no police left in Minneapolis to defend anybody.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, there have been so many encomiums, praise, and hagiographies of Benjamin Crump. And I think I mentioned to you before we came on that I read a long profile of Ben Crump in the Tampa Bay Times. How Florida's Ben Crump became the go-to attorney for Trayvon Martin, George Floyd cases. Talks about his upbringing in the South. He went to Florida A&M. That's where he met his first partner, Daryl Parks. And then it touches very, very superficially on the period where he was in Tallahassee, and just sort of skips ahead to him finding success as a personal injury lawyer. And this factoid that I wanted to share with everyone, this is by his own estimate. Crump says that he has amassed some $40 million in personal injury and wrongful death cases, and at least $10 million in civil rights cases. But there is nothing in this huge, long profile and biography of Ben Crump about what he was doing in Tallahassee. I don't know if you could call it extracurricular activities, but his other business entanglements. And that's where I'm going to segue and hand it off to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Well, again, from the Trayvon hoax, which, as you said, it's, by the way, it's both a book, and a film.
Yes.
It's number one on Amazon. And the way I got into it was I looked at Trayvon Martin's cell phone records. It was 750-page cell phone extraction report. And I found out that the key witness Rachel Gentel, people remember her, the plus-sized Haitian American girl. Right here, here, she was not on the phone with Trayvon. That was not his girlfriend. This was the real girlfriend, Brittany Diamond Eugene, that Trayvon fell head over heels over. And I found her, of course, in the yearbooks in Miami. There she is right there. So Ben Crump, he interviewed, under a lot of pressure, he interviewed Brittany Diamond Eugene, and he even told the court TV, he said, we pushed her making a statement. And that would be Trayvon's two friends, Stephon Bramble and Mario Riley, who had and still have a big criminal record, and gangsters. They were pushing her to come forward when she didn't want to speak. So Ben Crump did a phone call with her, and he interviewed her, and he went to this press conference, and he played a couple excerpts where she just repeated back some things that he had said on the news. And he said, she's 16 years old. Her name is Diamond Eugene. They were in love. It was puppy love. That's his girlfriend. And then 2 weeks later, they go to, the police go to interview Brittany Diamond Eugene, and 18-year-old Rachel Gentel shows up, and she says, Diamond Eugene's my nickname. So I exposed the whole fraud, and that's how I looked in. And I think Crump built his career on what I call the Trayvon hoax. He built his career on the situation where the witness was switched to get Rachel Gentel to incriminate and get Zimmerman arrested. Without Rachel Gentel, there'd be no arrest, there'd be no trial, there'd be no Black Lives Matter, there'd be no Ferguson. All the mayhem and deaths and rise in homicides, right here it started with the Trayvon hoax. So I decided to do a deep dive into Crump, what was going on in his life in 2012. Because I think Zimmerman's attorney, Mark O'Mara, had told me, well, why would he have participated in something like this? I don't believe he would possibly be motivated to risk his law license to be involved in the Trayvon hoax. So I looked into his background, and I find Crump in 2012 had a $106,000 federal tax lien in 2012. I kind of wonder, well, what's going on with him that he's got 106,000. Also, public records, every year, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, tax liens, federal tax liens, total of $36,000. So he seemed to have a lot of financial trouble going on, not unlike his pal and hero, Al Sharpton. And then I look at Crump, and I find out that he was a commissioner on the Tallahassee Housing Authority. This is like they work with HUD, and they get grants and loans for low-income housing for people in Tallahassee. And he's right there, he's a commissioner. But interestingly enough, on Crump's resume on his website, bencrump.com, he does not list this very prestigious position that he had served as a Tallahassee housing commissioner for 4 years from 2003 to 2007. Why wouldn't you list that prestigious position? Did he have some kind of problem? Was he investigated? Did he have any conflicts of interest? And then I did a property record search, and I find out that Crump was buying and selling, mostly acquiring and buying low-income houses. Very, very cheap, dilapidated, crappy apartments and houses in Tallahassee, houses that would never make any money. I'll show you a couple pictures. This is one of them. These houses would never make any money. You could never hope to resell them for a profit. You barely hope to get rent. So he was buying these things up like crazy during the time that he was a housing commissioner, and he doesn't list it on his resume. I wonder if there was some conflict of interest there. And then he has a lot of foreclosures. There's a big foreclosure. His places got foreclosed. He got code violations. He had liens put on these properties. He had evictions. He's evicting Black people from his apartments. That doesn't sound very woke to me.
Black tenants' lives matter?
I guess not. And then in 2007, after he finishes being on the Tallahassee Commission, having acquired all these properties, he forms 3 LLCs, the Lloyd Group, the Chancellor Group, the Theta Group. And he has the same 3 partners, and they continue this same type of acquiring of low-income houses. So right now I'm trying to find out, was he getting federal government loans? Was he doing things like Tony Resco? Well, Tony Resco would actually get these big loans to acquire and fix up low-income housing, and then he actually pocketed all the money. What was Crump up to, and did he use his position as a commissioner on the Tallahassee Housing Authority to take advantage of some of these rules to acquire all this property? And how did he get in such financial trouble that he had all these tax liens? So there's a lot about Crump that people don't know. And of course, most of all is what his role was exactly in the Trayvon hoax, where they switched these two witnesses, that he built his career on this hoax that has led to nothing but mayhem, and no one has suffered more from this than Black Americans.
Yeah, no question about it. And we talked about this when I initially interviewed you. Where are all the investigative journalists? I mean, there's plenty of them that work for Pulitzer Prize winning newspapers all across Florida. And this is like 101. And if Benjamin Crump were some, let's just imagine that the roles were reversed here, the races were reversed, and that he was a white conservative lawyer. I mean, every time there was a reference to him, it would say, and I'm not accusing him of this, I'm just saying, if it were reversed, it would be slumlord, blah, 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 right? It would like be copy paste. It would be like a macro that automatically appeared. But it doesn't seem, I mean, from your research so far, has nobody, not a single, not even like an alternative newspaper has delved into this?
Look, the media helped Crump build the story of Trayvon Martin was just getting some Skittles and iced tea on a candy run. He wasn't doing nothing, and he was attacked by a white vigilante. That entire story, the media was part of, much like you see that they were part of the Obamagate, Spygate. They're the last people that are going to expose what they built, the lies that they built. And with Crump, somehow they want to promote him as the new civil rights leader icon, the new generation. That's how he's tried to position himself, maybe to take over from Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson here at some point. But the reality of the mayhem that Crump has created with this narrative, every incident is racist. It's because of their skin tone, and we don't trust the autopsy or the police investigation. Don't forget, Zimmerman was exonerated. He was exonerated. Eyewitnesses, physical evidence. And only when they came up with this fake witness to claim that she heard the opposite of what the physical evidence and the eyewitnesses said, did they arrest Zimmerman. Black Lives Matter came out of that. By the way, Black Lives Matter founded by the Dream Defenders in Florida. I recommend everyone go to that dreamdefenders.org. This was a organization founded by Palestinian Arab Americans. They're affiliated with the PFLP, a terror group in the Middle East. And their stated goal was to teach youth of color, Black youth in America. They want to teach them intifada, how to riot and cause chaos and burnings and lootings. This was their goal. And they're rebranded themselves as Black Lives Matter. It's still a Marxist organization. And there's just a gross misunderstanding of the slogan, Black Lives Matter, which no one would ever think they didn't or oppose, or no one ever did. And the actual organization, Black Lives Matter, that corporate America and politicians have knelt down to, not taking the time to understand that they are an anti-American, revolutionary, socialist organization dedicated to overthrowing this government, overthrowing the Constitution, and really, literally using Black Americans for this goal. Yeah.
An update, just as a side avenue here, can you give us on Sabrina Fulton, the mom of Trayvon Martin? She was preparing to run for office, I think, the last time we spoke. How's her campaign going?
Yeah, her campaign, she's actually finally raised as much money as her opponent, Oliver Gilbert, no relation. He had a term limit as a mayor there in Miami Gardens. And she has these virtual town halls. I actually got into one and asked her a question. And the question I asked her was, I said, Ms. Fulton, you are a religious woman. The Bible says the Lord has forgiven you, so you must forgive. And I said, why have you not forgiven George Zimmerman? Perhaps the country could heal if you did so. And when I said that, she kind of smirked and looked away. Mm-hmm. And I said, isn't that what Jesus would do, forgive? And she went into this long answer about how she does not forgive. And it's interesting to me that had she followed her religion back in 2012 and simply said, look, I understand I kicked my son out for the third time for fighting instead of grounding him and he was out with no supervision. He got into another fight, and it was a terrible tragedy. And I forgive the man that my son was beating the daylights out of. None of this would have happened. She had the power back then, and she's always had the power to say, look, let's come together. I forgive Zimmerman for what happened. Let's come together. And so she didn't want to have any part of forgiving, and she's raised a ton of money from mostly celebrities. Jesse Smollett, by the way, donates about $1,000 to Sabrina Fulton's campaign every month. Takes one to no one.
Hoaxers of a feather. Hoaxers of a feather flock together.
Yeah, Sabrina Fulton knew about the witness switch. It's proven.
Yeah.
She knew about the fake witness, and she should have come forward, and I wish she would still come forward and say, okay, I know this was a hoax, and we need to come together and stop all this division. Just because the tragedy happened to Trayvon didn't mean it had to continue on a massive scale to everyone else.
Right. Oh, and just for to fill people in, the seat that she's running for is a Miami-Dade County
Commissioner.
And so Crump was a county commissioner in Tallahassee.
He was a housing commissioner. It's like being on the HUD, Housing and Urban Development. It's the local Tallahassee housing commissioner, and he spent his time on the commission buying up dozens of low-income houses and getting into financial trouble eventually based on his tax liens.
And how long ago was that he sat on the commission?
He was appointed to the commission by the mayor in 2003. It was a 4-year term till 2007. And as I said, the most curious thing is, why doesn't he list this on his illustrious resume while he was buying up and selling houses nonstop and evicting people? And then, as I said, he formed these other LLCs with 3 other people and did the same thing for years. So he was still buying and selling low-income houses even as of last year.
It would just be a nice basic exercise in journalism for a reporter who fashions himself or herself a champion of the downtrodden to track down one of these evictees, right?
Oh, sure. No, actually, I have some of the evictions. I even talked to one gal, and it was typical things. She was saying they wouldn't fix anything, the electricity, the water. Don't forget they had code violations too. The city of Tallahassee actually shut down several of his apartments because they had code violations. So it seemed that he wasn't really in the business of buying and selling property so it would appreciate or make money from the income. It appears it was one of these things where you get a government loan or a free government grant to buy a low-income property and hold it for a few years, and then they forgive the loan. There's all kind of crazy programs that he must have had access to or been aware of, albeit probably with a conflict of interest, while he was a Tallahassee housing commissioner.
Right. Well, can remind me, what was the name of that big time, I don't know if I don't remember, it was ABC or NBC reporter, the male reporter whose condo that you drove by?
Yeah. Matt Gutman.
And who had extensive conversations with Diamond Eugene, right?
Correct. Right. So Matt Gutman was one of the worst transgressors in the media that really fed the media narrative back in 2012. He went on the radio and did an interview when it first started and falsely claimed that Trayvon Martin's body sat unidentified in the morgue for 3 days. Total lie, made it up. Trayvon's father was immediately notified, and he went down and identified him. So that was a lie. Then he was in on the interview with Crump. He was actually present when they interviewed her. And then he texted and called her 72 times, sometimes at 5 in the morning, 12 midnight, and got her to do another interview for ABC. And he was he definitely knew that the idea that he didn't know Diamond Eugene was not Rachel Jeantel is very far-fetched. And he finally, after all these years of irresponsible reporting, he finally was suspended by ABC a few months ago when Kobe Bryant's helicopter went down in Calabasas, California. He went to the site and falsely claimed that all 4 of Kobe Bryant's daughters had died in this helicopter crash. He just made it up, and he was suspended. So he was just one of the guy at the forefront of the media lies and the false narrative that he was pushing all the time about this girlfriend who heard everything over the phone And he absolutely knew that this was not the same one.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking of him because just as a representative, example of, I mean, it'd be one thing if a journalist was just incapable of doing journalism, but in this case, the I don't know, it's malpractice if not malice.
He was,
I mean,
look, he was in on it. He was in on it.
yes,
He was hanging out with the family. He was at the apartment when they interviewed. He recorded the interview, the first interview with Diamond Eugene's 16-year-old girlfriend. And when 18-year-old Rachel Jeantel shows up, who weighs 125 pounds more than Trayvon, he's two years older and sounds completely different. The idea that he would not have known, having spoken to and texted with her 72 times, is a little ridiculous. So he built the narrative, everyone else ran with it, and it's caused nothing but harm and damage to the United States. This Black Lives Matter movement was all based on a hoax, and it just goes from hoax to hoax, and we all suffer because of it. And the people suffer the most, and probably the biggest fans of my film are probably Black youth. I get emails from Black kids saying things like, this one girl said, I grew up on this Trayvon Martin stuff, and I have a Black son, and I was afraid for him to grow up in America, but now I realize we got played. And they're the ones that are emailing me and saying, I was terrified to go out of my house, when I was 12 years old, because they said there's armed white men in the streets that want to shoot me. So it's just been a terrible mayhem for the very people that Crump and Sharpton and say they're trying to help minorities. They actually have caused them tremendous harm and damage by smearing the country as racist somehow. Trying to look for, we had a Black president for 8 years. We have Black mayors and Black police chiefs all over. And the racism is so hard to find. It's micro and it's in the system. We have to find it because it's so difficult to find. So that's the level that we know there's no systemic racism, because it's so hard to find it. It's very, very rare. And they're trying to smear the country for these political goals.
Right. The country, our most precious institutions that hold the line on law and order. Black people, white people maligned every single day in this country. And then these civil suits now, which are just multiplying by the week almost. We haven't even talked about the Ahmaud Arbery situation as well. Crump is getting ready to file a lawsuit in that case in Georgia. And again, it's the same template, right? The immediate knee-jerk reaction to seemingly disgraceful, evil images of police brutality, and then it always turns out to be not what it seemed to be. Did you track that case? Sure,
absolutely did. The Ahmaud Arbery case, of course, Crump came in to represent one of the family members. And in that case, the DA investigated it very thoroughly. It's online. They talked about how the car was ahead of Arbery, and he actually circled the car, and rather than continuing straight, he took a sharp left turn, punched the guy in the face, tried to disarm him and take his weapon. And the DA said, this is a clear case of self-defense. So they didn't pursue it. So only months later, of course, they decide, well, oh no, this was racism somehow. And Crump is in on these things. And the main thing is, these cases are so rare and they're such outliers. Police making mistakes or having an accident or dealing with somebody on meth who's acting out and trying to get them under control and someone dies. These things are so rare, but the media is the biggest culprit. They blow them up and try to portray them as if this is the norm. And this is America in 2019. That's what CNN said after the Jussie Smollett thing came out. This is America. And then they say, well, this is Trump's America. It's all for this political agenda. And I'm just hoping that the public is hopefully catching on that this entire narrative led by and fed by Benjamin Crump and Al Sharpton, and for the most part, this cable news is not legit. And hopefully we'll see in November if this stuff is rejected, the people that are pushing these narratives.
Yeah. When criminality and lying about crimes is not punished, It's just a self-perpetuating cycle. And one of the ways to hold liars accountable is to sue them in court and make them civilly liable. Give us an update on where George Zimmerman's civil suit is.
Right. Well, he's based primarily on the research, in my book and film, Trayvon Hoax. It's, again, #1 on Amazon. And I actually have the movie. You can watch the movie for free. I put it up for a while. If you go to the TrayvonHoax.com, you can link right there, watch the entire film for free. And the book also on Amazon. And he based this civil suit primarily on my research and all the evidence. I didn't really do anything except for go look at the public records. And as you always say, Michelle, you tell your viewers, go ask for public records. There's so much stuff there that the media won't touch or take the time to go see. And so he's suing Sabrina Fulton, the mother, the father, Tracy Martin, of course, Benjamin Crump, the prosecutors, the FDLE, and of course, Rachel Gentile and Brittany Diamond Eugene for their role in falsely prosecuting him, false arrest, and all the destruction that's happened to his life, not able to work, not able to have a job, all those things. He recently hired a new lawyer in Florida, and I think he's proceeding with the case, and he's hoping to start to get them under oath and depose them in the next month or two. And I think when that happens, it's going to be even more explosive. We're going to see the real roots of the conspiracy. What exactly was Crump's complete involvement with these two girls? Who else was in on it? Sabrina Fulton definitely knew about it and chose not to do anything. Instead, they got themselves about a $2 million settlement from the Homeowners Association in Sanford. Of course, Sabrina went on to record rap albums. They made a deal with Jay-Z and Harvey Weinstein, by the way, originally for their book called Rest in Power. And now Sabrina became a speaker on the speaker circuit, where she runs around saying the Trayvon hoax. She says, we can't even, go out of your house with candy and Skittles. You could be killed because of the color of your skin. That's the Trayvon hoax that they use to convince black people to be afraid and to vote Democrat. And now she wants political power. She's running for office for Miami-Dade Commission, and she's pushing the same Trayvon hoax. And as I mentioned earlier, I appealed to her, why don't you help bring us together rather than pushing this narrative? And she refused.
Yeah. At some point, these people don't deserve the benefit of the doubt or grace. I mean, I think that seems a little extreme, but I've dealt with enough of them in different cases all across the country to see that, appeals to some higher moral sense are just not working. And I mean, that's why our country's on fire, is it not, Joel?
Well, there's a lot of religious hypocrites in the Trayvon hoax. Even Diamond Eugene used to text Trayvon. She would say, I'm a child of God on Sunday, and Monday through Saturday, I'm a pimpin'. And, Tracy Martin said, I will follow my faith. Of course, Reverend Al Sharpton, Sabrina Fulton, church going, by all means, a religious person. But there are religious principles that guide us and guide people in Christianity, especially, about being honest under oath, about being honest and forgiving people and coming together as a community. There's nothing in the Bible that talks about extracting a ton of money for fake prosecutions and then creating death and destruction. Yes.
And we talked when I first interviewed you. And yeah, thank you for emailing me. Epigram is what I was looking for. Right. The opening quote of the book and the references to, yes, please.
Yeah, it's a great epigram. I actually read it at the also at the National Press Club when I did my speech there. It says, "For the Lord hates a heart that devises wicked plans, a false witness who breathes out lies, and who sows discord among brothers." And that's from Proverbs 6:16. And it's interesting when Trayvon's mother, Sabrina Fulton, she goes and gives these speeches, and she sometimes reads, believe it or not, from Proverbs, and she only reads 1 through 15. And I'm sorry, 1 through 5. And when she gets to 6, she doesn't read that one about the false witness.
Yeah, that's right. So, it's abrogated, to borrow another religious term. bearing false witness has been such a mainstay of identity politics in America. And for the last 25, 30 years that I've been reporting on these things, going all the way back to Al Sharpton and Tawana Brawley, there never seems to be any piercing of conscience on the part of the people who are making all of this money and getting ahead financially and power-wise and politically. And what's frustrating for a journalist is, you think to yourself, okay, sunlight is the best disinfecting, right? We're going to sanitize all of this moral pollution. And yet, of course, the hoaxes that we're talking about here that Crump has perpetrated with regard to smearing the police and manufacturing these narratives are at the extreme end of it. But there are more mundane examples of it as well, and I've documented these. In the mid-1990s, for example, I'm sure you recall, there were all of these claims that Black churches were burning. And so there was this huge epidemic, allegedly, of church burnings of Black churches. And when you actually looked at the statistics, just like if you look at the statistics with regard to race and police brutality, the breakdown was did not fit the narrative, actually. A lot of these things turned out to be arsons that were on purpose for insurance fraud, or black on black crime, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the mid-1990s. There was never any repercussions for lying. I mean, I think there were like a handful of prosecutions and convictions in those cases, and they ended up being slaps on the wrist. And then more recently, I documented, I don't know if you caught this, but there were these claims that were allowed to flourish on Twitter and social media that men were being lynched in the wake of the George Floyd encounter. Right. And it turned out that most of those were actually suicides. Who do you blame most for the perpetrating of these hoaxes and then the metastases of them, really?
Look, it's people, it's a political agenda that's supported by the media that has the same political agenda. And it goes back a long, long time. The socialist movement in America, communist movement, Marxism, started pretty much in the late 20s and early 30s in Chicago. And even then, they were trying to use race to recruit Blacks to join the socialist movement. Black people didn't want any part of it because they were religious people and they didn't believe in Marxism, which was atheist. Also, they believed in love thy neighbor because they were Christians. They didn't believe in this class warfare or this warfare between races. So that failed. They tried anti-war movement in World War II. We don't want to go to war in Europe. Then it was always latching on to a different movement. In the 60s, they tried to latch on to the anti-Vietnam movement or the anti-draft movement, because they knew that Americans would never buy into this socialist nonsense, that we're going to give all our money to the government, we're not going to own private property, we're going to eliminate the Constitution, and we're going to live under this socialist utopia. They knew Americans would never buy into this nonsense. So they had to always latch on to something else. In about the mid-'80s, they latched on to the anti-racism movement. And who isn't anti-racist? So that sounds like a possible successful venture. And Barack Obama was in on it in the mid-'80s. He was brought in from New York to Chicago to run the Developing Communities Project, was a socialist front group. And they wanted Obama as a front man to penetrate the Black churches in Chicago that were highly valued and highly organized, to bring them onto these socialist groups like Acorn and Midwest Academy. So Obama was in on this race socialist stuff, anti-racism, way back. And it's culminated in the last really 8 years since the Trayvon Martin shooting and the Zimmerman case, where they've pretty much taken over this whole anti-racism thing with Black Lives Matter. So if you oppose all this agenda, you're somehow racist. Oh, what's the agenda? Well, it's socialism. It's getting rid of the American system, American values, American principles that created about 1 million Black millionaires and a handful of Black billionaires, because we do have a colorblind economic system and educational system and society. So their front concept is anti-racism, but the reality, as I mentioned earlier about Black Lives Matter, is they're a revolutionary socialist movement that wants to destroy American society as we know it.
Where is the point of intervention to stop all this madness? Because we can't rely on the mainstream corporate media to rectify the situation. And I think what concerns me the most here is the role of people in the criminal justice system who should know better. Yeah, and I think we touched on this a bit too when we first chatted. I'm just flabbergasted that prosecutors allowed the big switcheroo to happen, that there wasn't a single person of conscience and a commitment to equal protection under the law, like, you know, all the little things that our criminal justice system is supposed to guarantee. I mean, if George Zimmerman is not able to advance with regard to the civil lawsuit, that's it. I mean, they win.
Yeah. Look, ironically, George Zimmerman could be the one person through his court action that could possibly turn all this around. Because if he gets Ben Crump or Diamond Eugene or Rachel under oath, I don't think, especially Brittany Diamond Eugene, she just graduated with a degree in criminal justice from Florida State University, of all things. Oh, the irony. Rachel hasn't left her house in about 6 years, it seems like. She's had PTSD. I don't think those girls are going to be able to lie, or were willing to lie under oath. And it's going to be interesting if they tell the truth. We'll end up coming on your show and saying, wow, George Zimmerman in the end is the one person who had the ability through his court action to expose this ridiculous racial fraud narrative, so we can start healing the country, because Sabrina Fulton wouldn't do it. There's a great deal of intimidation. Don't forget the judicial system, judges, lawyers, media, corporate America. They're so afraid of this wave of Black Lives Matter and their demands and being accused of being racist. They're just literally taking a knee and turning over, hundreds of millions of dollars and changing their policies out of fear. And that's a terrible place we've gotten to, that there's intimidation now is the way that they accomplish their goals. Who would have thought that you could just have a mob show up somewhere and demand that we eliminate the police department while they're looting? Yeah. And the mayor of New York and the mayor of LA says, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. I mean, they're so intimidated. They're following this ridiculous idea that just because the mob shows up, we're going to eliminate the police. Defund the police doesn't mean defund, it means eliminate. That was the goal of the 60s radicals, of these revolutionary movements, because the police protect private property. Communism doesn't believe in private property. That's why they want to eliminate the police. And the fact that people are going along with it is very dangerous. Yes.
Yeah, I think you cannot underestimate the power of a win in George Zimmerman's civil suit. Yeah. Would be because then what you could see, of course, is every other live case that Benjamin Crump has brought, lawsuits all across the country, Minnesota, city of Oklahoma City. It's the case that I've meant to tell you more about, the Daniel Holtzclaw case, which was built on like a Mount Everest of lies. To be able to bring in expert witnesses. I mean, if I were a lawyer defending against Benjamin Crump, I would put you on an expert witness list. Yeah. That is a deposition that I would want to have. So that's gold. It does bring up this other issue, and I can't remember if we talked about this before, which is just the dearth of lawyers willing to go up against the juggernaut of the Crumps and the Lee Merritts, the Sean King buddies, and all of the spawn of Al Sharpton. I mean, we have the Federalist Society. We have sort of a coterie of conservative lawyers out there that are fighting defamation cases, for example. But with regard to this specific area of practice, are there five?
Look, there's so much pressure and intimidation and potential loss of business. Now expecting that the mob might show up at your front door. There's a lot of reasons for people not to stand up. But there is one thing that Zimmerman and these other people have on their side, and that's the truth. And there are a few lawyers willing to represent the truth, and those lawyers, I think, in the end, are going to win if they can get into court, which is not always easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to move because we have a couple minutes left here. I'm putting up your website where people can access all of your documentaries. And of course, the last couple of years have been consumed with the Trayvon hoax. But I want you to be able to let people know about the other work that you do.
Oh, I appreciate it. Well, I did a film a year and a half ago called Trump, the Art of the Insult, which is very funny. You can watch that. It's on everything you can get on Amazon or my website. And that's kind of Trump's pillaging of the media and the other Republican opponents, and then Hillary. It's just a great film. Before that, I made a film called There's No Place Like Utopia. It's kind of like a Michael Moore movie. I run around talking to people in these progressive cities, Detroit, Newark, all over the country, and we find out that no one is progressing in progressive America. They're all regressing. And you can see the reality. It's very entertaining, and you learn a lot. I'm pretty well known for a film I made about Obama's background called Dreams from My Real Father. I went to Hawaii twice for that film and talked to people there. And that was twice as much as all the media put together went. And I put together the theory that Obama's real biological father was not the Kenyan Obama, but in fact was the man who he admits that raised him was Frank Marshall Davis. Now, even if the biology we don't know for sure, but we see that Frank Marshall Davis was a Communist Party USA propagandist out of Chicago who raised and indoctrinated and radicalized Obama in his youth, such that Obama showed up at Occidental when he was 18 after having gone to a exclusive Hawaii prep school, Punahou. He shows up and says, I'm a revolutionary Marxist at age 18. So that's the whole background of Obama's influence of Frank Marshall Davis. I've produced films on the Middle East history, Farewell Israel, Atomic Jihad, as well as a couple comedies, rock and roll comedies, Paul McCartney and Elvis, and several films on Bob Dylan and his history that are really enlightening. Bob Dylan, Inside Bob Dylan's Jesus Years is a pretty intense film. So all my films are available on that website. Amazon has most of them. And as I said, right now for free, you can watch the Trayvon hoax by going to thetrayvonhoax.com.
Well, you've had an incredible career, and I wondered if you had any advice for aspiring documentarians and aspiring out of the closet, conservative leaning content producers. I mean, on the one hand, it is dispiriting when you look at the deplatforming campaign, Silicon Valley censorship, let alone the climate that a lot of conservatives have to face in Hollywood, the blacklisting, the McCarthy-esque witch hunts and all that. But it hasn't deterred you, and it hasn't stopped the truth from getting out there.
Right. My advice is to people who want to get into filmmaking is to really learn how to tell a story, read the best storytellers. If you can tell a story, you can make a film. If you can make a film, you can't necessarily tell a story in that film. That's why so many films aren't quite up to par. So, telling a story is you can always figure out how to make the film. I just, took wherever my interest took me, I kind of went with it. Kind of go with your interests. I read Obama's Dreams from My Father, and he kept talking about this guy, Frank Marshall Davis. And I was like, I think I'll go look up that guy. And I got his book called Livin' the Blues, his life story in communism. And there's all these photos of Frank Marshall Davis that look just like Obama, spitting image. And he looked nothing like the Kenyan Obama. So if you just go follow your interests, sometimes things reveal themselves, as did with the Trayvon hoax. I got the audio tape of the interview with Diamond Eugene, and she sounded nothing like Rachel Jeantel. And I said, if I can find the real girl, Diamond Eugene, and find out why she was switched out, I'll make a film and write a book in this case about it too. And my other advice is, make a lot of friends with people that have a lot of money, and you can be successful.
There you go. Well, that last one. Easier said than done, right? But the point is that you have compelling content, and that it is not just the usual regurgitation of a certain set of talking points. You follow the truth where it leads you, and it really is the shoe leather reporting that you've done in all of your work. Whether it was with Obama's family tree or the Trayvon hoax. Last question deals with this, which is the state of conservative journalism. You and I have both had plenty of rendezvous with cable TV. I worked for Fox News for 15 years, almost since the founding of the station, and spent a lot of time in DC, way too many years than I should have. And many of these institutions are not interested in investigative journalism. Is that a problem, and how do you fix that?
Look, it's a big problem. I actually have been booked on Fox News 3 times, on Hannity, on Varney and Company, and on Jesse Waters, flown to New York. The limo picked me up at the hotel. I'm on the way. And each time, I actually met Hannity. I got my hair done. Each time I was canceled at the last second. I think, they made some excuse about they got too much, content or something going on that day. But I feel like maybe somebody flagged me at the last second. So there is this official conservative news, and then there's this, I guess I call it the real conservative news, people like me or Jack Cashill or yourself that really get into the nuts and bolts of it. And unfortunately, a lot of these so-called mainstream conservative, which I guess Fox is for the most part one of them, they don't want to go too far in their reporting. Even my Obama film, Dreams for My Real Father, I had a friend that showed that to Roger Ailes in his office before it came out. And he said, Joel will come on. You don't have to agree with him. You can let him talk about it. And Roger said, this is incredible, but we can't touch this. And that's unfortunately a lot of the mainstream conservative media is afraid of really exposing what I expose and what others expose about Benjamin Crump, about Obama's real agenda, what he's up to, where he comes from, what his motivations are. And unfortunately, I can't express a ton of optimism that we can really break through more than we're doing right now with all the forces against us. Somehow Trump got elected, and he certainly is doing his best to, in most cases, push out on Twitter, for example, a lot of these stories that even Fox News won't touch.
Yes, there are way too many, and I'm talking about the right now, not just the left, that's already a given, way too many narrative shapers and keepers of the gate, and not enough straight truth tellers. That's why it's so important, and I'm appealing to all of my followers on Twitter and Facebook, and people who will watch us now on my YouTube channel, to support your work. Your website is at highway61ent.com. Everyone's got to follow Joel on his Twitter account at Joel S. Gilbert. And I just, the verve with which you pursue stories is just something I wish I could clone and mass market.
Well, you're doing it right now.
And if it helps, I'm glad to help out there, because I really do think that the work that you do is exactly the example and the cure for what has ailed the establishment conservative media for way too long. And we need truth tellers now more than ever. So it was a joy. It was a pleasure to catch up with you, Joel. And we'll do it again, and hopefully with good news.
All right. Thanks so much.
Right. Take care, Joel. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.